So let's meet the man in the black shirt, Donovan Brown. I'm very excited today to speak with Donovan. This interview is in making for almost 5 years. So 5 years back, I approached Donovan to do a recording. I was dev manager at that time of Channel 9, and I wanted to do a series there, Humans of Microsoft. And I was very impressed with Donovan when I saw him first time on stage. But things couldn't happen, but now we are here. So Donovan is a partner program manager in Azure, CTO incubation team at Microsoft. So there is no introduction necessary for people in Microsoft ecosystem, but for people who are not in Microsoft Azure camp. So Donovan is a spokesperson. I will call him a spokesperson. He may not be officially spokesperson for Microsoft, but all thing DevOps in Azure, cloud advocate for best pattern and practices of DevOps comes from Donovan. And I know Donovan worked for Microsoft. He works for Microsoft, but our discussion will be very cloud agnostic. We are not going to discuss very specific to Microsoft, but we are going to ask him about best pattern and practices, which you can use in any cloud. They are like timeless. So I'm going to talk about that. And more so, I want to talk to him about the person behind this black shirt. Everybody know him as technical person. He is in every conference and does a lot of presentation and all. So I want to know how he is so successful, how his presentations are so flawless, because this is something very tough. I have to do some presentation for Microsoft, and that was the most scariest thing I have ever done. Very, very scary. And I see Donovan there on stage, and he's so relaxed, calm, and I wonder how you can do that. So I'm going to go into that too. Let me start with the first question. Donovan is in CTO incubation team at Microsoft. So I want to know what they do, Donovan, and specifically what you do in this team. Seems like something very new, incubation team. Never heard about it, but if you can throw some light on it.
Sure. Yeah. So the incubations team is just over 18 months old. So it's not been around a really long time. And before I joined the team, I actually didn't know the team even existed. And then what happened was I reached out to Mark Razinovich, who's now my skip level manager. And I was just looking for career advice. I asked him, I said, hey, Mark, I'm looking for the next chapter of my career at Microsoft. I really want to have a big impact for Microsoft. I'm currently a people manager, but I don't care if it's a manager role or if it's an IC, which means individual contributor role. I just want to have the biggest impact at Microsoft that I can. Do you have any career advice? And then his response was, let me see if I have a job in my team for you. And I was like, really? I was like, this is awesome. And then I got to meet the incubations team, and what they do is they're looking to solve problems that haven't been solved yet. So they're not looking to add a feature to a particular product. They're talking to our customers, they're listening to the industry, and they're saying, man, writing microservices is really hard. And it is. Running a microservice, doing service discovery, doing things like secrets management, service invocation, state management, connecting to external bindings, and it's really tough. So what they do is they dream up a way that we can solve that problem for the industry. And one of the things that we did was Dapper, which is one of the products that we're hearing us talk a lot about right now.
Yeah.
And you're going to hear me talk a lot about it. So when you talk about what's Donovan's role on a team like this, it's kind of twofold. One, I bring a DevOps perspective to some of the products that we're working on, because the first question I ask myself whenever I see a new technology is, how do I apply this to a pipeline? How am I going to be able to automate these processes to help deploy software? Right. And I asked some tough questions of Dapper, and they've already had to send some pull requests to go address those concerns that I had. Because like, hey, I got to be able to automate this. I have to be able to run this a million times in a row and nothing bad happens. So I really need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it was amazing to see the team just jump on that feedback and start implementing new features that allows us to better play nice or be what I call a good DevOps citizen with this particular product. So my job on the team is, one, to bring a new, fresh, unique perspective and make sure that it's focused on DevOps and delivering value for all of our customers, and that our products do that. And then to do exactly what you described in the intro, go to the conferences, go to the meetups, speak at different on podcasts, do interviews like this one here, and make sure that people are aware of the great things that we're doing on the incubations team. So that's pretty much the role that I have.
True. Very cool. So I have a couple of questions. One question I have about mentorship.
Mm.
You talk that you approached him to be, as a mentor. And I was always curious to find out how people, manage their career, how important mentorship is, how important mentors are. And I see your growth in Microsoft. It's extremely rare, I will say that not people grow with the speed with which you grown, and people can see from outside that why. But I was wondering, did you get a lot of mentorship early in your career also, or in your life? How did you got into this DevOps business?
Oh, those are two different questions, right? So how did I
Yes,
get into the DevOps business, and then how would you do the mentorship? I'll talk about the
right,
first one. Yeah, I'll talk about how I got into the DevOps business first.
sure.
Before I joined Microsoft, I was a process consultant for a little company called Notion Solutions. A
Mhm.
process consultant is an individual who knows a lot about Agile and Scrum and Kanban and different ways of writing software. And at the
Right.
time, Team Foundation Server was an extremely, actually, it was called Team Foundation System, I think, back then. Back in 2006, I believe it was, I joined that company. And what was happening is Team Foundation Server was a product released by Microsoft that was going to help teams adopt Agile best practices, do
Mhm.
continuous integration and continuous delivery, source code management. It was like everything that you needed in one little box. And I was hired by this company because I had a long career in software. I live in Houston, Texas, and I always point like people can see where I'm pointing, but down the street is where Compact Computers used to be. It's about 6 minutes away from me.
Okay.
And that's where I started my career back in 96. So I've been writing software since 96. I've been writing software in all different types of languages, different patterns. And they brought me to Notion Solutions to say, hey, we want to take a lot of that knowledge and help you share that with our customers and implement Team Foundation Server while you're there. So
Mm.
being a certified Scrum Master, I would help our customers come from the waterfall world into the Agile world, powered by Team Foundation Server.
Right.
Once you get people really good at continuous integration, the next logical thing is continuous delivery. I'm now building and testing this package of code, but now I have to deploy it out into production. And many teams are doing it manually. And they would just copy files around and hand off like a baton in a relay race to the next team to go do their part of it. And what
Right.
we wanted to do is automate as much of that as we possibly could. So we were doing DevOps long before there was a name for it. So
Mm.
we were just out there
Mm.
trying to automate these deployments. When Notion Solutions was acquired by another company, a lot of the Notion Solutions people started making their way into Microsoft. And it was kind of like this interesting funnel where one would come in and then pull the next one after them, right? And the next thing you know, like the first 13 of us that built Notion Solutions at one point or another are still or were at Microsoft. And we always
Mm.
joke that Microsoft, the company previously known as Notion Solutions, because the entire company had come over. So that's how I got into Microsoft, was
Okay.
I was brought over to then sell the product that I was consulting on for the previous 7 years.
Right.
Come
So
in, Donovan.
at this time in your career, it's all self motivation, or you have any mentor who guided
That was
you?
I've had some key people in my career. So I was a self-taught developer who
Hmm.
was actually trying to be a biology major and
Wow.
then was doing research at Methodist Hospital to be a cardiac surgeon when they realized that I liked computers and asked me to go off and computerize their database. They say, we have all these files, Donovan. We prefer them to be in a database. Can you go do that for me?
And you found
It's
a
a
new love there.
Yeah, exactly. It's 11 o'clock at night. I'm in a hospital and I'm playing with this computer. And I realize I'd rather be playing with this computer than doing the research I'm supposed to be doing. And that's when I
Oh,
went and I switched my major from biology to computer science. I went to
interesting.
Compact Computers and asked for a job. They wouldn't let me be a programmer because I had no professional experience and I didn't have a degree, but they
Right.
would let me be a technical writer. So I got
Ah,
in as a technical writer where I would basically listen to brilliant people at Compact and just translate what they said to where everyone could understand what it is that they were trying to do, which kind of funny is because that's what I do on stage, right? I mean, this is pretty much what I do today is I take in
right.
all this information and then I find a way to share it with the masses as best that I can. When I was at Compact, I wanted to be a programmer, even though they wouldn't hire me as one. So for 6 months, I bugged my boss to prove to her that I could write software. I'm like, just let me write software. I can do it, I promise. And she's just, get away from me, get away from me. I don't have time to do this. You're a tester. I don't need you to do that. Just write documents. I just wouldn't stop nagging her. And then one day she's like, fine, go modify this application for me. I need it to test these hard drives. just go make it do this X, Y, and Z. And I was so excited. I ran back to my office. Within an hour, I'm back. I'm like, here you go. It does everything that you said. Give me something else to do. And I just kept nagging her to the point she went to her boss and said, give me something this guy cannot write in an hour because he's driving me nuts. I need something that he has to program that he can't finish in a day. So they asked me to write a fiber channel exerciser, which had never existed because we were building the first fiber channel boards at Compaq. So there was no samples I could go get. There was no one who's ever done this before. I had to go figure out how to write this type of application from nothing. And what I realized is I was doing that 8 hours a day. 6 months goes by. So I've been at Compaq for about a year now. And I realized for the last 6 months, I've written a single technical document. And I haven't tested any hardware. All I've been doing is writing software for the last 6 months, and software that's being used to actually shape the industry because the fiber channel board's now shipping. I'm now writing tests for that particular board. And I asked my manager, like, why am I still a technical writer on paper when I'm clearly a software engineer? And when I talk about mentors, Maria went to bat for me and said, you know, you're absolutely right, Donovan. Let me go see what I can do. So back in 1997, my title changed from technical writer to systems one software engineer at Compaq Computers. Now you got to remember, this is 97, 98. And now I'm a programmer at Compaq Computers, the largest computer company in the world. This is the bubble time. And I left a year later, right? Because I was like,
and you were coding in what language?
Oh, C++ was my first language that I programmed in. Yeah,
not an easy language.
No, I was a self-taught C programmer. And then when I got to Compaq, I started writing C++ exclusively. And I wrote C++ until I switched to C# in around 2001, which is, yeah, I adored C++. I thought it was such a powerful language, difficult to learn, which also makes you kind of proud when you're good at it, right? Because you know it's a hard language to learn, and to put in the time and the dedication to get good at one of the hardest languages, it's just, it was a badge of honor.
True. Yeah, absolutely.
So Maria was a great mentor right at the beginning. They gave me the support. I moved teams inside of Microsoft, and I remember inside of Compaq. I remember when I left Compaq, it was because of another mentor of mine, Daryl, who came to me one day and he says, Donovan, we're about to go through a layoff. I should not be telling you this, but you're not being laid off. However, this is the best time to look for a job because we announced publicly we're going to have a layoff. He says, you need to go look for another job. I was crushed, right? Because I'm thinking, this is the coolest job I've ever had. This is the largest computer company in the world. Like, we had the cool badges that you could swipe and get into different rooms. I thought I was just like, this is the best place. Why would you ask me to leave? He says, because you're the best developer I have, but you're the lowest paid developer I have. And says, I can't get you the money that you deserve. And I just like, nope, I'm staying put. I love this place. And he, being the mentor he was, says, no, you're not staying. You and I are going to go to a job fair together. And there happened to be job fairs back then where you would go take copies of your resume and there would be these booths of people who wanted to hire technical people, and you would talk to them. And I remember when we were filling out the questionnaire, when we first got in there, you write in your name and your salary. And I kind of peeked over at Daryl's salary and I was blown away at the number that he had written. And it was like more than double what I was making. I was like, and he sort of smiled at me and said, that's why I need you to leave, right?
Wow.
Because you deserve the money that I'm writing down, and you just saw the number that you wrote down. So we went through, and lo and behold, I doubled my salary when I left Compaq, right? And it was just, now I understand, just because you love what you do doesn't mean you should be underpaid to do it. And that's something I keep telling myself over and over again. Know your worth, know your value, and don't settle for anything less than what you're worth when you work. And so Daryl was another really instrumental person in shaping me and making me who I am today, so that I could be hired by Notion Solutions, that then led me to Microsoft.
Right. And when you came in Microsoft, I know they have a very good mentoring program where you can go and sign up and all. Have you used that, or you're just personal network and you are just approaching? Because why I'm asking these questions, my audience is young developers who are getting into management or getting dev lead, dev manager position, and mentoring is very important. So when you mentioned that, I thought, wow, this is something very important people to know, no matter how smart you are. Often people think, I'm so smart, I don't need mentor, I know everything. But no, you do need. And so I'm just curious, like, how did you find out your mentor in Microsoft or other places?
Great. So it was interesting. I did not use the official program. Your network at Microsoft is immensely important. Like you want
Right.
to build the broadest network that you can across as many areas of Microsoft as you possibly can. And being a public speaker the way that I was integral in my success, because when they see you talking about something like DevOps at Build or Connect or Ignite, our biggest first party events, people see that and say, okay, my customer is struggling with that exact same thing. I need that guy that they just saw on that stage come and talk to my customer about DevOps, because they'll believe them because they just saw them there. So I started to meet more people that were in the sales team. I got to meet account managers because I would do that. Then when you do that for our biggest customers, those thank you emails get forwarded to your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss, and people start to know who you are. And then people just start to gravitate towards you. I remember once Scott Hanselman gave me some really, really incredible advice about my career at Microsoft before I ever knew him. And the only reason that he reached out is like, he saw my name everywhere, but he didn't know me. So he like pinged me, like, why am I seeing your name everywhere? Like every conference I
Wow.
look at, like I'm seeing this and I don't know you. Like, who are you? Let's get to know each other. So we got on a call one day and he was just helping me out of the blue. He just said, you know what? One pieces of advice I would give you is, if you want to get promoted, go inside of our career guide in Microsoft, look at your level, and then look at everything above you, like the level right above you, and start doing all those things,
Very
right?
good advice. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't get promoted with the hopes that you can do that stuff. You get promoted when you can prove you've already been doing that stuff. So I
True.
started doing that very thing. I would look at, I was a 63, right? And I'm like, okay, what does a 64 do? And I would start doing all the stuff the 64 would do. And I would go to
Right.
my manager and say, hey, I'm already performing at the level above me. Like, how can we go fix that?
Right.
Another piece of great advice, real quick, that I got at Microsoft, and this was interesting because it was the day I arrived at Microsoft. There was a random guy. I can't remember his name now, but I knew his name at one point. I'm sitting there getting my new computer and I'm trying to set it up. He peeks his head in and says, so you're new here today? It's like, yeah. It's like, this is the first thing you need to do. Go in your inbox right now inside of Outlook and create a folder called Way to Go. And it's like, okay. It says every single time someone sends you a thank you email, you copy it into the Way to Go folder.
Wow.
He says, and what I want you to do is when you write your connect, and at Microsoft, we have this thing called a connect, where you have
Awesome
to look,
advice.
exactly, you have to look back at the last 6 months, look forward to the future. So when you need to look back, you go into that folder and you're going to have
Right.
a list of all the great things that you did in the last 6 months so you can write your connect. So I started doing that. And that was like the day I arrived at Microsoft, some
And that
random
guy
person
just randomly
said,
comes in
go
and
do
tells
this. And I
you.
have that Way to Go folder to this day in my inbox. And I still add emails there. I added one a
Awesome.
couple days ago. So that was great advice.
Really.
And then the other thing about Connects, if you remember about Connects, so this is going to be like a cheat code for people who work at Microsoft right now.
True. But I think
If
it holds good in other companies too.
Sure, if you have the same type of process, this will work. So the
Yes.
other piece of advice that I got was, you remember when you were at Microsoft, you would actually ask for someone to write a connect for you, right? It was
Yes.
like that anonymous feedback that you would
Yes.
get from someone for doing that. And the next really good piece of advice I got was, Donovan, every time you get one of those thank you emails that you put in the Way to Go folder, the very instant that you get that, send that person a connect request. Like, send it to them immediately. Don't wait
Wow.
6 months from now. Don't wait till they forgot that you worked together. Don't wait till they forgot why they like you. So the moment they said thank you, you send them a connect request. At
True.
one time, I had like 30 or 40 of those things to my manager, all glowing. And my manager was just like, I got tired of reading them, Donovan. I got tired of reading
Wow.
them. They were just glowing. But a lot of people don't send those out. A lot of people don't have
True.
that evidence of the great stuff that they're doing. And that I need to do better at. I don't do that as much as I used to,
Right.
but I always give that advice to people that I manage. That's like, every time someone says thank you, send them a request for perspective, which is what we call it nowadays,
Right.
and get that feedback logged somewhere so we can use that as evidence when it comes time for promotion and rewards.
Right. Awesome advice. Very good. I hope our listener and viewers who are watching this is just one thing. If they'll take, it will change their career. This is completely, alter your future. It's awesome
Exactly.
advice.
Like I said, these are like the cheat codes, right? I'm telling you
Yeah,
right now.
of life. Yeah. But, of course, these are cheat code, but behind that, you still have the self motivation, the hard work, and all that. That's the source of everything. Those mails coming because of the
Yeah.
work you have done. And that brings me to my next question, which I always wanted to ask you: how you do such good presentation? What is the secret? Are you born this confident? guy, be on stage in front of thousands of people and everybody's there. Scott Guthrie is there. You're opening sometimes the conferences.
Yeah.
How? What is the
Um,
secret?
my mother is the secret. My mom's a perfectionist, and
Mhm.
she would not accept anything less than the best that we could do. I remember my English papers is a story I always tell, where my mother would grade my English papers far worse than my teachers would. So
Oh,
I would write and write and write and write and thought I did a great job, give it to my mother, and it would just be a bloodbath. My mother would just rip my papers apart and I'd have to rewrite them again. So it was never good enough, right? So you always had to be the best that you could do every single time. And
right.
my dad's ethic is also something there, right? So my mom's a perfectionist and my dad's a borderline workaholic, right? So what I got in my mind is you got to put in the work and it has to be perfect, right? So when you're born in an environment like that, where
Oh,
you're just constantly being pushed to be the best that you can be, never settle for good enough, always be the best. And I can see how hard, like, you don't get this for free. You got to put in the hours, and my dad's willing to put in those hours. So whenever you see me on stage, that's not the first time or even the 50th time I've said those words. That's the 150th time I've done that
wow.
exact demo. There's a one story, I hope it doesn't get me emotional now, but there was a period of time where I felt like I was a little nervous because I would put so much pressure on myself to be perfect for Scott or perfect for Julie or whoever I was doing a demo for, that I would almost pace like grooves into the floor of my hotel room. And it's only 8 minutes, right? But I'm saying the same 8 minutes. I'm gesturing where my hand's going to be, where I'm going to click, what's going to be on the screen.
Wow.
And I did it so, and I would do the exact 8 minutes, and then I'd stop, take a deep breath, and I'd start over again. Hey everyone, Donovan Brown, and then boom, 8 minutes. And I would do it till I just couldn't get it wrong. And same thing with the demo. I would do the demos until I saw the demo fail in every possible way, so that if it did fail on stage, I could turn it into a training moment. Oh yeah, you know why? I know exactly why this didn't happen. I forgot to do X, Y, and Z. And I would show you why it failed and fix it on stage, which lets you know that I'm not just doing a demo. I understand how this stuff actually works, because not only
Right.
did I build the demo, but I've made every possible mistake you can imagine, because I've done the demo 200, 300 times. I was one of the few people who found out that there is a limit to the number of service principles you can have in your Azure subscription. And it's a high number. But I was practicing this demo so often that it finally started failing. And they're like, Donovan, like, you're not allowed to have that many service principles. Like, you've got to
Oh,
go clean these up. And it's thousands, right? It's a scary number. And that's when you realize that you're rehearsing your butt off, is that you're breaking stuff that no one's ever broken, because you're reaching limits that they never thought anyone actually would reach, because you're just doing the demo over and over again. So why am I confident on stage? Because I know the demo is going to work. Because I've
yes,
seen the demo
yes.
work thousands of times. I've said these words thousands of times. When I'm on stage, I'm not nervous. I'm performing for you, because I know all
Yeah.
this is going to work. I've seen it all work over and over again. Why am I going to be nervous? I'd be
Yes.
nervous if I didn't know that this was going to work. I'd be nervous if this was the second or third time I'm saying these words and I hope I remember it. But I've memorized this stuff already and I've done the
Wow.
demo countless times. So why would I be nervous? This is my time to shine. This is my time for you to be able to see this cool technology. Like, even talking about it now is making the hair on my arm stand up. Like, this
And
is the
I'm thinking
opportunity.
I should have met you before.
But
You
that's what
have
it's
changed my
about.
life too.
Yes, because that's what it's about. And then that's why when you see me on stage, it's like, why is this guy so comfortable on stage? It's because you know how hard I've worked for this 8 minutes that's about to happen? Like, how
Right.
am I not supposed to enjoy this? If I didn't enjoy this 8 minutes, I'd stop doing these, because the amount of days and hours and weeks that I spent preparing for this would not be worth it unless I get
Right.
to stand in front of, I think one of the coolest ones I did was 23,000 people, and you're sitting there in front of 23 and you look up and it's just like, I can't believe I'm here. And all these
Yeah.
people are going to listen to what I say for the next 8 minutes. How awesome is this? And then the demo that you do is awesome, right? Because you're doing stuff
Right.
that they've never seen before. You're demoing features they haven't seen. So to me, it's an honor also to
True.
just be given the responsibility from Microsoft. I get to represent Microsoft. It doesn't, sometimes it still doesn't like dawn on me, like, holy, this company has been so pivotal in all of what we do, how we live our lives. Like, the technology we're using today is running on a platform written by the company that I have the privilege to work for, and they want to
Right.
put me on stage to represent them. How can you not take that seriously?
True.
Because
True.
you're now part of history, the history of one of the most important companies of my lifetime. So
Yes.
yeah, when they put me on stage, I do everything that I can to make sure that that moment is going to be perfect.
Mm.
And if you don't, what's really interesting is that if you look at the fraternity or the class of people who have been on there, there's some of us that have been there a long time.
Yes.
And there's some of them that have not. And if you go back and look at their performances on stage, you might realize which ones of us get asked back and which of us don't get asked back, right? Because you mess up on a big stage like that,
you're done.
yeah, you don't get invited back very often, and for right reason. Like it's a lot of responsibility. It's not a right. Some people are like, oh yeah, it's my I'm a so and so. I made this level. I deserve to be up there. No, I don't.
No.
I don't subscribe to that at all. Like you have to earn to be up there, no matter what your title is, and you have to deliver when you're given this opportunity. And that's what I try to do.
True. And whatever you see, which looks so effortless, has so much effort behind the scene. So there's no secret here. There's no secret magic. It's just your preparation, hard work, dedication, and going after one after another. Because I remember I didn't even know how to practice. And I read in some book, you should stand in front of mirror and start practicing. And when I did that, looking myself in mirror was more daunting and nervous. It made me more nervous. I said, man, this is wrong advice. So it takes time. There's no shortcut, I believe. So this is good. I always wanted to know what is behind this such cool presentation and big audience. So
countless hours. And I don't watch myself in the mirror, but I do the full demos out loud. And I this is a little TMI, but I say my presentations in the shower. So while I'm taking a shower, I'll just pace back and forth in the shower, saying my lines over and over again, getting the timing just right, figuring out when I'm going to drop the joke, when do I pause, where my hands are going to be. Like, I think if you were to look at all of my time on stage, there's been 2 times that were actually spontaneous. Even if it looked spontaneous, only 2 of those things were. I said "remaculous" on accident once, and like made up a word on stage. And I think that was at Connect 2018. That was actually a spontaneous accident, and we kind of just rolled with it and had fun with it, and ended up trending on Twitter, which was kind of cool. And I think there was one other time where it was spontaneous. All of the other stuff that you see, the jokes, the spontaneous stuff, that's all scripted. It's just pretend that you're going to be on stage at Broadway. Like they don't make those lines up when they're on stage. They have been rehearsing that play for you for months before they go live. That's exactly what I do on stage. I perform for you. It just happens to be a demo.
Wow, very good. Very good to know. I hope all our audience who are listening take this learning from here and focus on the preparation. Now let's shift a little bit the gear on towards the technology, because you are known as a DevOps guy. What are the engineering best practices an organization should follow? So my question is, some CTO calls you, or you become a CTO of a small startup. So it's a very broad question, but we will go with as much as you can talk about. What are the engineering best practices and pattern you should adopt in your organization to do a smooth product development?
Great. I'm obviously a big fan of Scrum and Agile. I've been a certified Scrum Master for a long time. So I would go in and say, I really want you to start implementing an Agile form of based development. One of the other pieces of advice when I would say do that is do it by the book. Do not outsmart yourself and think that, oh, you know what, Agile is good, but we don't need daily stand-ups, or Agile is good, but we won't do a sprint review every sprint. We'll do a sprint review like every 6 months. Like, well, then you're just a waterfall team. Like, why are you calling yourselves an Agile team? Like you're throwing away some of the best practices of that methodology. There's a reason that those meetings exist. There's a reason that Agile is shaped the way that it is, and that the meetings have certain rules, and we have those rituals that we do every time. There's value in them. So when you omit one or just decide you don't need one, you're also saying, I don't need any of the value that comes from that meeting. I find that people drop daily stand-ups, for example, because they take too long. Well, daily stand-ups should not take too long. That's a failure on your implementation. Either your team is too big or you're not running the meeting correctly, but you don't not do the meeting because you don't know how to run it. You learn how to run the meeting in 15 minutes or less, and then you get back to work again. And then you get the value out of that constant ability to inspect and adapt your process on a daily basis. And I meet too many companies who tell me, oh yeah, we tried Agile, it didn't work. Or we tried Scrum, it didn't work. And the first thing I say is like, talk to me about your process. What did you do differently, right? Well, we did Scrum, but, and as soon as they say but, I'm like, no, you didn't do Scrum. Then if you didn't do sprint reviews at the end of every sprint, then you weren't doing Scrum. You were doing something else, but stop saying Scrum failed because you didn't do it. So my advice to a company and wants to figure out how they're going to be able to deploy software on a regular basis is start getting really good at Agile and Scrum. Because what I think, and I think Sam Guckenheimer said this, was that DevOps is the second decade of Agile. When you get really good at producing increments of shippable software, which is the goal of Agile, and let's be very clear, Agile makes no mentions of shipping software. All it says is produce an increment of shippable software, potentially shippable software at that, right? So when you get a company really good at that, and every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, they're doing a sprint review of software that's potentially shippable, but then it takes months and months to get this code into production, it shines a really bright light on the fact that you're now really good at producing value, but you're not really good at shipping value. And that's why DevOps is the natural progression to, we're really good now at doing Agile. We're really good at producing these increments of shippable software, but why is it such a manual, pain, arduous task to get it into production? Let's start doing some DevOps best practices. So I would start with Agile, personally.
So one question I have, and a lot of people talk about Agile. What are your take on the documentation side? Because often I hear people say, hey, we are Agile, so don't want to write any documentation or a functional spec or something.
I think that's ridiculous, right? Because the Agile Manifesto does not say not write docs. It says we value working software over documentation, not instead of documentation.
True.
You should be spending at least 20% of your current sprint grooming the backlog for your next sprint. During that grooming process, I had designers writing specs for what the colors, buttons are going to be. I had designers writing specs talking about when do we use a drop down versus radial buttons versus checkboxes. I had people writing design documents for what that next thing should look like, what we're going to be working on in the next sprint, not this sprint, right? So we always spend at least 20% of our available capacity in the current sprint dealing with the documentations, the grooming, and the clarification of the items that we might do the next sprint. It's called grooming your product backlog. So that's where that documentation time starts to come in. It's not we don't have to document now, we're called Agile. It's like, that's not even remotely true.
Okay, good.
When I think about DevOps, the best practices apply no matter what size company you are. I do DevOps best practices when I'm the only developer on the project. I still use continuous integration, CI/CD. I do the proper branching strategy. I was an athlete when I was younger, and I was always taught you play how you practice. So I'm not going to develop one way by myself and then try to go be a part of a team and they do everything differently. So I do best practices no matter if I'm alone or if I'm on a big giant team like the Azure DevOps team, which at its height had like 50 different feature teams all working together. So if no matter where you are on that spectrum, the DevOps best practices like infrastructure as code, collaboration and communication across all your teams, getting everyone involved in your planning are good no matter what size company you are. But one of the things that I would do to break down some of those silos is during the planning of a new feature or a new offering, bring in the operations people, bring in the QA people, bring in the SREs, and bring in the security people to the very first meeting you're going to have about what this feature looks like. Historically, when I take over Scrum teams, I find out very often that the QA team is not part of the Scrum team. The QA team is a completely separate organization that the Scrum team will eventually throw their code over the fence to, and then they will have to then test this code and then send back all these bugs to the particular team. That, first of all, slows you down. Second of all, the item that you produced was not potentially shippable because it hasn't even been tested yet. Those QA people needed to be involved in the actual team itself. Another thing that I find out when I don't have them involved, and I'm just using QA and dev as an example, but this happens no matter what, substitute whatever pillar or silo you want with QA, this happens across the board. When I bring the QA people into the conversation up front, we save a lot of time because the QA person might be logging bugs that aren't bugs because they weren't there when we were making the decisions on why it behaved that way. And just because it didn't meet their expectations, they log it as a bug when it's working as designed. But how are they supposed to know it's working as designed? Because they weren't a part of the planning meeting. So when I bring them into the planning meeting with us, we end up with better requirements because the QA person has an opportunity to ask those questions while we're just on paper, while we're just in our heads, while we're just designing. And it's so much cheaper to change things when we haven't written anything. Because even if the QA person's idea is better and right, we've already spent months writing this code. We're just going to have to figure out a way to make this work because, it's a better idea, but we don't have time to make that change or that improvement because we have all this other backlog just pushing us towards another deadline. But had you had that person in the conversation in the beginning, you wouldn't have made this mistake and you would have had a better product and their testing would be faster because they have an idea of what to expect. They're not getting a
Right.
black box, which they have to first dissect and understand what it's supposed to do, and then write tests against it, and then go run those tests. If they're part of the planning, they can be designing the test and writing the test while you're writing the code. So that when you throw it over the fence to them, and it shouldn't be a fence, when you hand it over to them, they know exactly how they're going to attack that code. And they'll be able to give you estimates on how long it'll take them to be able to test that code. And then you actually will be able to tell your stakeholder when you will be done with the feature. You're not done just because it's code complete. You're done when it's tested and ready to be shipped. And it's not ready to be shipped unless QA has seen it. It's not ready to ship unless the infrastructure is in place, right? So you should have brought the infrastructure team in when you're talking about writing microservices and determine if you're going to be using Kubernetes or not. How many nodes is your Kubernetes cluster going to need? Because I can be provisioning that for you now so that when the feature's done, we're ready to go ahead and deploy into that thing versus you having to send in a request now that you've done some testing and realize that you need this cluster that we don't even have the space for now. But had you known that you were going to be constrained on the cluster size that you're going to be able to use, you might have architected this differently, right? If you know you didn't have infinite nodes, infinite memory, you might have thought about the problem differently. But you didn't know that because you didn't involve the QA people. You didn't involve the operations people. You didn't involve security people. Right? You didn't involve all these people when you were designing this thing. And had you done that, all these questions and all these rough edges would have been filed away, and you would have had a product backlog item that just told you exactly what needed to be done at every stage of your deployment. So those silos are bad, right? Because and you got to break those down. And the way you break them down is inviting those people into the earlier stages of your application development.
Right. Very good point. I want to ask you one more clarifying thing. A few years back, I think 7, 8 years back, there was a thing came like no more testing. Even in Microsoft, we got rid of all the testers and converted them into dev. So the dev owns the testing. Now, people took the next step and they say, hey, I don't need a QA team also. So QA is gone and test is gone. It's all dev. So I want to know from your experience, do you think the QA team still needed a team which is out of devs and who are basically a wall of quality, or not needed and it's all devs are responsible for quality also? Where do you find yourself?
It depends on the type of software that you write. The reason that, and I think that the example you're talking about is specifically the Azure DevOps team, right? Because there are QA teams inside of Microsoft, right? But the Azure DevOps team, who happens to use the exact product that they produce, and they use it before any of our customers do, they are our first line of testers, right? We didn't need another batch, because when you dog food is what we call it in the United States. Some people call it drinking your own wine in Europe. When you use the software that you develop, you are your manual testers. You're doing the exploratory testing every single day. And I love the idea of putting the onus on the engineers to design the quality into the product versus bolt the quality on after when all the bugs come back from the QA team, right? But if you're not in a very unique, and I tell all of our customers this, on the Azure DevOps team, we were in a very unique position to where we got to use the software that we actually were producing for our customers. Now, if you're writing trucking software that manages truck inventory and you don't drive a truck, you don't actually get to use your software like the truckers will use your software, like the drivers will use your software. You're not in that same headspace. You want to get as close to it as you can so you can kind of empathize with them and write the right features. But you will probably need another team that is closer to that side of the house, who's going to be able to look at this software in a way that's closer to the way that the actual users of your software are going to be able to use it. I'm also a big fan of exploratory testing, which I think everyone should do. And it's hard, in my opinion, for developers to break their own software. So what I've seen a lot of developers do is I'll go break my buddy's software and they'll break my software, but you don't exploratory test your own software because you're going to treat your software really nice, right? You're going to put all the right values in the right place and you're going to do all, it's going to look perfect and it's going to work perfect. But
Always
you
works in a
break
dev
my friend's
machine.
software, I'm going to have a blast breaking my friend's software, right? So that's how I do that too. So just to really quickly answer your question, I think it depends on the type of software that you're writing. And if you are a user of the software that you write, I think if your developers are developing developers tools like we were in Azure DevOps, the need for that external team was mitigated by the fact that we had to use the product ourselves. But if you don't, then I think a QA team adds a lot of value.
Right. Okay, this is good to know because it's not one solution for all the problems. Don't get rid of QA team if you are not dogfooding your own software, you do need that person. In fact, when this change happened, I missed having the test manager in the room because he used to squash all this, overly optimistic devs coming in and saying, yeah, we'll ship it this date and that date. And test manager used to be there and he said, now I want this much time to test and this, and. And so I missed initially him not being in the room, but later on, you take that responsibility. The dev
Exactly.
manager becomes the test manager. And then it was a learning experience for few months, but very soon you realize, and it makes the software quality better because now dev doesn't have anybody to point finger at that, hey, they didn't find the bug.
Yeah, and also we had that, we kind of implemented the same if you wrote it, you run it
Yes.
mentality at Microsoft, which means in the past, I remember when I worked at Compaq, I would write software, I would not write any test. Wouldn't write unit tests, wouldn't run
Right.
manual tests. And I would throw it over to the QA team. And the QA team would test it. And if they ever, I remember one QA person came over and asked me where the source code was. I was like, what do you need my source code from? Like, just go test my software from the outside. You don't get to go on the inside. But I didn't realize then how clever that tester was being. He's like, I want to know what the code looks like and see if I can get parameters from the outside on the inside in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So he was ahead of his time at that point. But the thing is that was someone else's responsibility. So I never wrote unit tests. And the reason that I didn't care about that is because once the code was in production and the software went down, someone else got called at 3 o'clock in the morning, not me, right? Even though I wrote the code, even though it's my bug, some poor IT person is on the phone trying to troubleshoot why my software is not running. I sleep through the night perfectly. So there's no consequences for my bad behavior. But when you're the person that they call at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the application crashes because you wrote that software, all of a sudden you become much better at quality.
True.
You become a lot better at writing unit tests because you want to sleep at night. There's a consequence for your bad behavior. But if I have no consequences for my bad behavior, I'll keep doing what's easiest for me. And not writing tests is easiest for me. So I thought that was really important that we didn't just get rid of our QA team. We also said, you are now responsible for the live side of this particular application. And should it go down, one of you is waking up. And then the whole team is now having to pay the price for poor quality. So I am going to test my peers' code a little bit harder than I would before. I am going to be reviewing your pull request a little bit more closely to make sure that the code coverage is high and that you wrote the necessary unit test. Because I don't want to be woken up when I'm on call because you didn't write a unit test. You start making the entire team start to realize that one of us messes up, we all pay the price for that. So let's start making sure make each other, like cover each other's back a little bit. And a lot of companies just get rid of QA. And then you have that long months of time before people realize that, oh, it's our quality is now our responsibility. Make them run the software. Wake them up at 3 o'clock in the morning. See how fast your quality goes up.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, very good point. Again, a change of pace. I will go back to a little bit questioning on your management philosophy. And so as you move from dev to lead to a manager, going from a big company to a very big company, Microsoft. So what I want to know, when a dev get promoted to dev lead, now its role is a new role, and what he should change about himself to be successful being a lead, which is M1, first level of manager. So it's two-pronged question. And the second part is when he becomes M2, when he becomes manager of managers, their manager. And both of these changes bring a lot of change in you to be successful in this new role. So I want to hear from you because you went through this journey and what you learned and what are your advices for people who is becoming dev lead and then who are becoming dev manager.
One of the things I struggled with was not wanting to tell them how to write the software. Because I was in their shoes yesterday, right? I just got promoted to a dev lead and I'm in a planning meeting and part of me just wants to tell them how to do this stuff, right? And I had to take a step back and stop doing that because for the younger people, sometimes the best way to learn is to make the mistake because you'll remember it. If you don't, again, the consequences, if you never do it, I learn more when I fail to get something right than I do if I got it right on the first time. And what I needed to do is allow my team that that opportunity not only to fail, but to experiment and think differently than me. Because if I just keep telling them how to do it, I'm squashing all this innovation that could be happening, these different ways of thinking, because they respect me because I'm their manager and I tell them to do this, so they're just going to do that. And I have just robbed them of the opportunity to learn, to experiment, and potentially come up with a better idea than my own. So what I had to learn how to do is just not force my opinion on the team and wait till they came to me where they were stuck or needed my advice, but not constantly offering my advice to people when I was an M1. Same thing when I was a Scrum Master, which is where I kind of got the first taste of that, where I'm now running this team and I was a developer, but I'm trying to tell the team how long stuff should take. It's even worse, right? I'm not only telling you how to write it, but I'm telling you what your estimate should be, right? I made a lot of big mistakes that way when I was younger. And I just learned the hard way that I had to step back. I had to relinquish some control. And when I learned to delegate, like, so much more stuff got done because I'm no longer the bottleneck either, right? So it's very uncomfortable though at first. And what I realized as a manager, my whole goal was much like a Scrum Master. It's to remove any impediments or blockers in front of the people that are working for me or that report to me. So in my one-on-ones, I'd be like, what's stopping you? What do you need me to go? I used to joke a Hulk smash. Like, what do you need me to go move out of your way so that you can go be productive? That's my job as your manager right now. Now, if you want to come and geek out on tech and ask me questions about something, love to do that too. But my first priority is making you successful by removing anything in your way. And so I think as an M1, that was really important. When I got to an M2, that changed a little bit because now I'm trying to teach that group of managers how to remove barriers for their people. And then if they couldn't, then how do I lean in and add some of my authority or some of my weight to clear some of those impediments for their people? But it's a different level of conversations. But the philosophy that I had as a manager was always be the manager I've always wanted. So whenever I was in a situation, I'd say to myself, if I was in that person's shoes right now, like, what would I want my manager to do to me? If I had the greatest manager, what would I want them to do for me right now? And what was really good for me at Microsoft is I had great examples before that, because I had been in some of their situations before, and I had great managers prior who would drop everything or move a mountain or just spend quality time with me and just listen to me. And I remember I was having a really rough time at Microsoft, and I had to reach out to my skip level, which was Charlotte at the time, and she dropped everything and sat down and met with me and got me where I needed to go. And I remember fast forward a year and I get a frantic IM from one of my skip levels, the person who reports to a manager of my people. And I was like, wow, reminds me of the situation that I had, my own personal situation. Cleared my calendar, dropped what I was doing, got to the office and had a one-on-one with that person and set them down because I said, this is what one of the best managers I've ever had has done for me. So I'm going to do that for my people too. There's a caveat there, though. Being the manager that you've always wanted isn't the manager that all your people have always wanted, right? Cool. And I learned that. So I've had a couple scenarios where my management style just didn't fit, and at some point I tried morphing myself and changing my behavior. Then I realized that this is taking away some of the things that make Donovan, right? There's a reason that a lot of the people that I've gravitated towards me are here and very successful. And for me to try to contort myself to fit this exception or outlier to that collective way of thinking, it was doing a disjustice to both of us, right? I was never going to be able to be the manager that you wanted. You and I were never going to be able to see eye to eye because we're not like-minded in that way. And I want to be very careful. I'm not saying lack diversity on your team. I still have a very diverse team, but we were like-minded. What I mean by that is we always wanted to be the best. We were all striving towards, but we didn't agree on everything. And that's what made us great, is the fact that we didn't agree and that we had different perspectives and different life experiences that we could bring to a particular problem and find out. But if you didn't want to be the best, if just being good enough was good enough for you, I'm not the manager for you, right? Because I won't accept that. And you and I are going to constantly be at odds because that's just not who Donovan Brown is. I want to be the best at what I do. I want to make my team the best team that they can be. And I like that competitive drive that people have that just makes them want to be a winner. I love that. And those are the type of people that I'm really good at managing. So I think you need to identify that as well. I honestly don't think there's a person who can be a good manager to everyone, because everyone is different and everyone needs something else. What you're going to do, and it's something you need to be very careful about, is you are going to have people gravitate to you that are like you. but you still need to strive to have a diverse group of people on your team.
Right.
And I specifically hired people who knew stuff I didn't know. That's how I got the diversity. When I built my first team, I didn't go out and hire 4 more Donovan Browns that knew what Donovan knew, because we don't need that. You already have me. I already know what I know. What I hired was a person who knew Linux that I didn't know. I hired a person who knew infrastructure like I didn't know. I talked to a person who knew process better than I knew process. Collectively, we were a much better unit than any one of us was individually. So I did not go hire replicas of myself. I wanted that diverse perspective. However, we were all go-getters. We all wanted to be the best. We were dubbed the league by the industry. Like, this is a team that, like, these are good people who will not settle for just being good enough. And so that's what I mean. Like-minded, but diverse. And it can be tricky to get that. And people who want to be led the way that you're going to lead is important to identify them. And as quickly as you can identify those are the outliers that don't fit, find them a happy home inside of Microsoft, right? Because there are managers out there that are probably going to be much better for them, and everyone's going to be better off because they're going to be happier. And if they're happier, they're going to be producing higher quality software for Microsoft, which is good for Microsoft as a whole. But I learned very early on that I can only bend myself so far before I don't even want to be a manager anymore, because I'm trying to be so different for so many people that it wasn't benefiting anyone at that point.
Right. So no, that's a very key point which you said. I think a lot of people miss that. The key point you said was that you want to be a manager, who can manage certain kind of people, and if they are not there, maybe you're not the right manager for them.
Correct.
And a lot of people think the other way around. Maybe they are not the right employee or the right report. And so, so if you came across this kind of person who is reporting to you but not reaching to your quality bar as such, do you have any tools or tricks to elevate him, help him out, or you say, okay, looks like it's not working, and you find him a new home?
So I've only had to do it twice. I've only had to do it twice where I found new homes for people that were a better fit for them, because we had gone around and around, and it becomes pretty obvious that they're dreading the one-on-one. You're really not looking forward to the one-on-one with them, because you're just like, man, this is going to be a tough meeting. Or they keep delivering things to you that just aren't meeting your expectations. And no matter how many times you push it back or you explain what you want done differently, it just never makes it there. Then you realize there's either a disconnect in the way that we're communicating. And I have executive coaches that I work with to help me through some of this stuff. So if you're fortunate enough to have an executive coach, lean on them. Mine has just been instrumental. So again, back to mentorship. It's been amazing for when I'm struggling with an employee. I can come to him and get an outside perspective on, well, why have you tried this? Maybe this is another way you can approach that particular problem. And then I can go back and try that. And when all else fails, it's like, okay, let's just agree that where would you be more happy? And then how can I leverage who I am at Microsoft to make sure that you can have a nice, safe home in that other organization? So I'll make introductions. I'll show all the great work that they've done and explain to them that I think they'll just be a better fit in your organization for X, Y, and Z. One of the people I promoted to be my peer, right? It's just like, okay, this isn't working. Like, this relationship is not working for us. We're constantly butting heads, or just we're okay for a month and then we're not okay for a month. Like, this isn't healthy for either one of us. Went to my manager and said, okay, they're not happy. Right. And I think something based on it, I had a career discussion with them. I said, based on our career discussion, I think this might be a really good move for them. Are you open to it? And obviously my manager was like, of course, whatever's best for them, which is what your manager should always say. And I believe that it was, and we approached that person and offered them that opportunity, and they were ecstatic with that opportunity and they took it. Right. So I never want to have to fire someone, and I've never had to fire someone. But I do understand that not everyone is going to be able to work for Donovan Brown. As a manager at Microsoft, our goal is to attract and retain talent. Retain does not mean report to Donovan. Retain to me means still working at Microsoft. So as long as you're still working at Microsoft, I feel that I've succeeded as a manager. And that's what I try to do, make sure everyone loves working at Microsoft as much as I do. I adore working for this company. And if you're not adoring your job, then I feel like I need to go get you somewhere where you're just going to love waking up every morning and proud to be doing the work that you're doing. If that's not for me, that's okay. My feelings aren't hurt. I just want you happy. and you're clearly not happy. So that's a gut
Absolutely.
again. Be the manager you've always wanted, and make sure that your people feel happy and supported, even if that means not working for you. I never felt the need to build a big organization and mine, and don't let them leave because I want more people. It's like, no, I want the best people around me, and the best people around me are going to be happy. So if you're not happy, you're not going to be the best that you can be, and you need to go somewhere and go be happy.
Sure. Yeah. So Donovan, when you're hiring, what you look in a candidate when you're hiring, and you know that you have just an hour and to talk to candidate. So what specific things you look for to find out their passion, knowledge in an hour? Is it a vibe? So what are the things you look for in a candidate while hiring?
It's interesting. It depends on what I'm hiring them for. If I'm
Mhm.
hiring a manager, I'm going to ask them different questions than I'm going to ask an engineer, for example. One of my favorite questions to ask an engineer is, what was the last thing that you just wrote for fun?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if they say, oh man, as soon as 5 o'clock comes, I don't write anymore. I don't want to see that computer till Monday morning. I'm like, well, you're probably not the person I'm looking for then, because I want the person who just loves this stuff.
Cool.
I write more software for fun that you'll never see than the software I write professionally. I just love making that stuff work. And I think
Cool.
it shows in my work. It shows in what I do on stage, because you can tell that I'm not reading a script like that. Those are that guy's words. Like, he does the stuff he's talking about on stage. Like, I rub DevOps on all kinds of stuff to make it better, right? I mean, that's what I
Right.
do. And it's what I do in my fun. It's my wife, my wife lets me like go release that. Like, I'll be on the couch with her. And I have a tell. I think I start to like twitch my leg or something. I don't know what it is, but she knows what it is. It's like, go work. And she'll just tell me, go work. And I'll run upstairs and then I'll work for a little while, and then I'll come back and then I'll be able to settle down and relax again. But she knows that that's about me. And it shows in the work that I do for my company
Cool.
too, because it's just, there's just this level of detail
Right.
that's in that code, because I adore it. I want it to look good. I want it to be the shining example for how all code should be written. And I'll write comments and I'll test it. And that pride that I take in my work, that's what I'm looking for in an engineer that comes to my team, right? I
Mm.
want a person who has that same love for just writing code. If I'm talking to
Cool.
a manager, then I'm going to ask different questions, right? Like, just what is it about management that excites you? And I'm looking for things like seeing the success and the growth in others. Management was far more rewarding than I thought it was going to be. I
Mm.
didn't really want to be a people manager. I wanted to be an IC throughout my entire career at Microsoft, but I had a very clear path in mind. My destination was to be a partner at Microsoft.
Mm.
And one of my mentors, going back to mentors, John and I were talking one day, and he kind of laid it out to me really quick. He says, Donovan, how many ICs do you know that are partners? I only knew one. He says, how many managers do you know that are partners? I knew lots and lots. And he's like, yeah, the path to partner, if partner is truly what you want, is the shortest path is through management. It's like, all right, fine, I'll be a manager. I'll just grin and bear it. Then I became a manager and I loved it. Right? I loved being able to hire those amazing people and to see their growth and live vicariously through them as they're going through the same stages of their career that you went through. When you see Abel do his first keynote, or Jessica do her first keynote, you're like, man, I remember how, because you can see how excited they are. Like, I remember that. And there's something about being a manager that's really rewarding, to be able to provide those opportunities for others in your organization and to attract this amazing talent to Microsoft and say, I made Microsoft better because I was able to hire and attract these people to this company. There's an immense amount of pride in that, as being a manager, but it's not for everyone. It's a lot of
Cool.
work, right?
Cool.
Connects and expense reports and one-on-ones and rewards and bonuses and promotions. And there's a lot that goes into being a manager, but if you're good at it and you enjoy it and your people enjoy having you as a manager, then it's a really rewarding experience for sure.
True, true. So I want to ask you another thing from outside. When I see you, that you are a partner in Microsoft, and you came as I guess as a dev, you said, or as a PM, and senior PM, principal PM, and partner. So it looks like all success and everything is great. But I want to know about your failures, because I'm sure on in this life journey, not everything was success, continuous success. So I would like to know about your failure. It can be personal or professional, and how did you came out of it? What did you learn? So if you can share some of
Sure.
your experiences.
Yeah, I have my personality can be polarizing, and I had to learn how to tone that down
Hmm.
quite a bit. And one of the best things that I did is I had a 360 evaluation done. It was after I became a manager, but you can have them even if you're not a manager.
Right.
So my executive coach did a 360 evaluation. And for those who don't know what a 360 evaluation is, it's where they do anonymous interviews. Well, it's not totally anonymous because you recommend people. I recommended, I think, like 7 or 8 people to be interviewed. These were people I used to work with, people that used to manage me, people I currently manage, my peers, and my current direct manager. And what they would do is they would go have conversations with them, but they wouldn't tell you the answers that they got from each individual. So you got this collective image of what Donovan Brown is. Words like arrogant came up, which were just heart-wrenching. Always has to be the smartest person in the room, always has to be the loudest voice in the room. There was just a lot of really hard to hear things about my personality that it was just uncomfortable to hear, but I'm so glad I did that, because now I can try to be careful about that, or change the way I reword something, or just be quiet, right? I mean, there's so many times where I thought I was adding to the conversation because someone had had an experience and I had had the same experience, but me sharing my experience too is almost like I'm negating theirs, as if mine was more important. And mine didn't really add any, but what I was trying to do was just share with you that you and I had that same experience, but it didn't come across that way. So what I learned was I had to really think about the words that I say when I speak up in meetings. How do I approach particular conversations? How do I not appear arrogant? How do I not appear self-centered and things like that? So it was a lot of personality changes that I had to make, which were really, really tough. But that 360 was amazing. Hard to read, especially the first. I've gone through 2 of them now. The first one is really, really tough to read, but it really shaped, and I think I've made some great improvements. The other mistake I made was, as you become a manager, you carry authority, and you can't keep treating your direct reports as peers. So you can't talk to them the same way that you used to talk to them. And it's really uncomfortable, and it's really unfortunate, because I've also had direct reports that are friends of mine, like that have been personal friends of mine for 20 years. But there's a time where we're on IM together, just having fun. And there's time where we're talking about work, and I have to turn off and turn on some of those different behaviors. And I remember one scenario where I had a public chat. We were in Microsoft Teams, and we were having a public conversation. And I was pretty upset about not getting the results I was expecting to get, just like we talked about earlier, right? I have very high expectations. I was not seeing the results I expected to get. And this conversation just devolved into almost an argument. And I didn't realize that I'm not having a heated debate with my peers anymore. That's what it felt like to me. But from their perspective, this is their skip level manager talking about this stuff. That's a scary conversation to be a part of. Especially with some of the statements that I was making on my expectations and why isn't this done. This isn't Donovan talking to his peer. This is, oh my God, my skip level manager is now upset. Like, what do we do to go make this better? And I realized in hindsight, that should not have happened in public. I am their manager and their skip level manager. I am not their peer. And everything that I say comes across with a completely different sound and a different weight than it did when I was their peer. Another example I remember once, and it dawned on me again, and I forget this quite a bit, that I'm their manager sometimes. And this is something I would encourage you to make sure you remember. I do a lot of one-on-ones with my people so I can stay in touch with them. One of my meetings had canceled, and my last one-on-one of the day, my last meeting of the day, I could have done it half an hour earlier, because now I have a hole in my schedule. I pinged the person on IM. I was like, hey, I'm free. If you're free, I'd love to go ahead and just do your one-on-one now. They didn't hear that as, hey, you can say no. If you're free, you're free. It was like, oh my God, he stopped eating lunch, runs to his office, and jumps on a call out of breath, still wiping food off his mouth. Like, what are you doing? He's like, man, I'm so sorry I missed your call. I was down. He like missed my call. I was like, I was just letting you know that if you were free, I was free. And I realized Donovan knew you did not say that. What he heard was your skip level manager said, come get on a call right now. And that's not what I said. So I had to remember, Donovan, you can't just ping them like you're their peer or their friend. You're their manager, in some cases their skip level manager, and that hits them a completely different way.
True. Very, very good points. Yes. So same thing I want to ask you. You gave some very good advice, and whoever is listening should keep these advice in their mind when they become manager and how to act. But I want to know from you, what is the worst management advice you heard when you thought later on, this may not be the best advice?
I don't know that I've gotten a lot of bad advice, but I have seen a lot of bad examples.
Ah,
Right. So, and I
mm,
remember I wasn't a manager yet. And this story got back to me. I wasn't even in the meeting, but one manager took an opportunity to berate one of their people in front of all their peers over an expense report,
mm,
an insignificant infraction that should have been an email
mm,
just between the two, like, hey, it's a heads up, this is not okay, we need to go ahead and correct this. But to then berate them in front of their peers to make an example out of them over something so insignificant as an expense report error, and it was just an honest error, to me it was like, why would you do that? That's just someone flexing because they're a manager that wants to show how powerful they are. And you'd have, in my opinion, have no business being a manager, because
ah,
your job is not to berate people, your job is not to embarrass people, your job is to empower people. And you took
true.
this opportunity and your authority to go embarrass that person. And that to me was a good example of, like, never do that. But
Mm,
saying all that to say, I almost did that in that chat, right? Because here I was, and not trying to berate anyone, but obviously coming across and not understanding the tone that I bring when I speak like that. And maybe that's exactly what was happening in that meeting. Honestly, maybe
true.
the person didn't even
Possible.
realize that, but I wasn't there. But it's interesting, when I heard that, I was like, "Ooh, don't ever do that." Right. And
Right.
I've seen other examples where people have done things to me. I'm like, yeah, I really wish they hadn't done that. I'll never do that. So I don't know that I've gotten a lot of bad advice per se, but I've definitely had several examples like the one I just shared with you. I'm like,
Sure.
okay, don't ever do that to the people that report to you.
Right. Right. And the best management advice you got.
Man, that's again, I don't know if that it's advice as much as great examples, right?
True.
I've had a lot of great examples where my managers or skip level managers have just dropped everything when they
Mm,
realize that one of their people, no matter where they are in their organization, is hurting or uncomfortable or unhappy and just needs an ear to talk to. And it wasn't oh, we'll talk to your direct report, I'm your skip level, you can't come talk to me. It was just this willingness to make sure that they felt heard no matter what. And I did that for I still have one-on-ones with people. It's funny because we're talking about management, and I was a manager at Microsoft for 4 or 5 years. I'm not a manager now. I'm actually
mm.
an individual contributor again, but I still have one-on-ones with a lot of my people I used to manage, because they're like, Donovan, we don't want these to stop. And to
Wow.
me,
That's very
I
nice.
still have those meetings with those because I know how valuable they are and how important they are. And one of my old managers, when I was no longer reporting to them, still met with me as well because I felt it was important. So I got a lot of good examples of, this is about making Microsoft better. And if an
Right.
hour or 30 minutes of my time once a month or once a week makes Microsoft better because that person's better, that's an easy decision for me to make, to have that meeting with them. So again, it's a lot of good examples I've seen and throughout my career,
Mm, mm.
having great managers at Microsoft that I then try to replicate and duplicate whenever I'm a manager or in a situation where I can go have that positive influence on someone.
True, true. And so, Donovan, initially we talked about what shaped you as a person, as what you are today. A good mentor, your mom, who was, strict on the quality. Um, I am wondering, is there are any books you'd like to recommend which really, motivated you, helped you, and influenced you to be what you are today?
I've gotten, actually, there's been a couple recent books that I've read that I wish I'd read sooner, because
Mhm.
maybe my path would have been a little faster. So I just joined the incubations team, and for a very short moment, Luke Kim was my manager, and he recommended go read The First 90 Days,
Mhm.
which is about transitioning from one role to another role.
Mhm.
And What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Right. So
Right.
Donovan, like, you've done really well. You've gone from senior technical sales professional to partner program manager in very short time. But what got you here won't get you to distinguished engineer, technical fellow, or corporate vice president, right? You got to think differently. And I remember I was reading one of my, I think it might have been What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And there was a paragraph that I read of what you're not supposed to do. And it was so jarring that I copied it and pasted it to my best friend and my wife. Like, so like, yeah, you do that all the time. So what? I'm like, yeah, you're not supposed to do that. Like this book is telling you like what you're not supposed to do. And it was like that paragraph was written directly from like my life experience. It's like, oh my gosh. So that book was like so eye-opening to realize that, wow, you're
Mhm.
not alone. You're not the only
Right.
person that's made these mistakes. Like, you're not the only person going through these transitions. There's a whole book of anecdotes and things you should and should not do. And you've done half of these, which means a lot of
Wow.
people have done these. So it kind of made me feel better on, okay, you're not the only person who's struggling at some of these things. And it was also interesting to read that, hey, like, we know this is coming. These are obstacles that are going to be in your way, and they gave me the tools to address those going forward, and just to slow me down a little bit. Because when you're in a new role, you're so excited, you want to make a big impact, and you want to go in there and fix everything, and that can rub everyone in that organization the wrong way.
Right.
Because you don't know the culture yet, you don't know the people yet, and here you are trying to fix something that wasn't even broken. And we're not trying to do that, but we're just trying to show that we're excited and have an impact. But again, it's all about perception and how it comes across. And I know I've done that and in the past. And then I reflect on some of those meetings, like, wow, I remember I had some people who didn't like me that much in that organization. I wonder if it's because I made that type of introduction, right? Versus just taking the time and taking 90 days to really learn the lay of the land and understand how this team works, and then figuring out where your role and how you fit into this team, versus just going like a bull in a china shop, trying to have an impact immediately when that's not, no one expected that of you, because you're new, and we know that you're new. Just take your time, learn your role, and then have an impact when you can. Don't be a bull in a china shop trying to impress everybody with how much you know, because all that's going to do is turn people off. And it was just those books. What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and The First 90 Days are the two most recent books that I've read, which are really great. Good Strategy, Bad Strategy is another really good book if you've never written a strategy before.
Okay.
A lot of us, as you move up through management, get asked to write strategy documents. And I always drug my feet on it because I didn't know how to write a strategy document. I never took a class on writing strategy documents. I couldn't find a good YouTube on writing strategy documents. I didn't even know where to start. And so I would try to push it off or figure out some way of not doing it. And then I finally broke down and said, my team needs a strategy. And Good Strategy, Bad Strategy was a really good book to kind of break down the process and the thought process you go through to say, hey, I need to diagnose a problem first. And once you have a problem, you need to figure out what are the barriers between you and solving that problem. Your strategy is how you remove those barriers. Right? And when you break it down that simply, it's like, oh, wow, that's not scary. Like, yeah, but no one's ever told it to me that way before. So I was always scared to sit down and write a strategy document. And the last book I would recommend is OKRs. Not Measure What Matters. There's a book literally called OKRs. And if you want, I can send you the links and you can put them in the description video.
Yes. I will.
There's a great book there because it talks about you need a vision and a mission even before you get to the strategy. And that was writing a vision and mission was a really powerful management skill for me to develop, because when I wrote those and I allowed my teams to see them, my entire organization now understood what our North Star was. They didn't have to question if this is a good idea or a bad idea. Either it drove us towards our vision or it didn't. And if you don't articulate what your vision is, how is your team supposed to know which way to row? And I went as far as putting my mission and vision in the signature of my email. So every email you got from me reminded you of what my vision and what my mission was. Wow. And it was really cool to see how I would send out emails not only to my people, but to external people. And I would get comments saying, Donovan, man, I really love your mission and vision. How can we help you with that? Because they also wanted that thing to happen. So it was a cool way for me to even solicit support from outside my organization when they clearly knew what Donovan's team was focused on. So, and your vision and mission should be short. Mine were each one sentence. So I just put them in my signature of my emails. And it was a really good thought exercise for me as a manager to say, how do I rally my troops? How do I get everyone pointing in the right direction? What I do is I give the entire organization a very clear vision and mission. And then from there comes your strategy, and out of there comes your OKRs. It's a beautiful structure.
Perfect. Very good. So thank you very much, Donovan. Really heartfelt thank you. I think our audience will learn a lot. I learned a lot from you. And hopefully this interview is very different because you talk about tech all the time, everywhere people know. I wanted to bring the person behind this black shirt, who is Donovan Brown, and I hope people get a glimpse of it as a person of you. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, it's just, again, sometimes it's weird that people care what I think and say. So it's always humbling to be asked to do interviews like this. So I'm just happy that you asked me.